There are hidden dangers to the CPAP that your doctor will never tell you, but you need to know about. On top of that, we've been lied to about the positive impacts on longevity and preventing disease like heart attacks and strokes. That's because a CPAP does not fix the underlying problem in your airway. It keeps you stuck, it keeps you dependent, it keeps you trapped on this machine for life. And here's where things get even worse. A CPAP can set you up for something far worse than sleep apnea. And that's why we're going to unravel the scandalous $1.1 billion lawsuit involving cancer and CPAPs. But even beyond that, there's something else you may not have even considered. Something hidden, something you cannot see with your eyes, but you're breathing it in every single night if you're using a CPAP. So make sure to watch this episode so we can uncover the hidden dangers behind your CPAP and what to do about it. The first hidden danger is the false sense of security that we need to talk about, because when you're expecting something to work for you, just like if I try to sit down at my desk and I think the chair is going to be there, but it's not, I'm going to fall right on my butt. But with the CPAP, we're not talking about a bruised butt. We're talking about something way worse than that, and that's dying of a heart attack or a stroke. That was a big transition, but nonetheless, we get told all the time, if you don't use a CPAP, your heart's going to explode, you're going to have a stroke. Now, that's very true. Having sleep apnea is one of the number one drivers of the top killers of Americans in many developed nations, heart attacks and strokes. But is the rhetoric of a CPAP is going to make the stroke and the heart attack go away, is that even valid? And that's why I'm going to share these studies with you. Because unlike when you just go to an office, you got 15 minutes, and whatever the doctor says is like the law or the religious creed, let's actually look at the facts, which sounds crazy that I have to position that as such, but here we go. Let me pull up a paper from the Journal of the American Medical Association. This is one of the premier journals that doctors should be reading. We'll see if they really are. So this was done in 2017, and just some highlights here. They took a bunch of studies and they looked at a lot of people, about 7,300 people. So anyone that says there's not enough people in the study, you should go back to statistics class. That may not be for you watching on YouTube. It's more so you don't need to continue to kill more people or give them a false sense of security before knowing, because that's what research is for. So what they found in this study, through all the different things, the major comparison is that the use of PAP, which can be CPAP, BiPAP, or ASV, was not associated with reduced risk of cardiovascular outcomes or death for patients with sleep apnea. Cardiovascular death, all-cause death, still happened at the same rate. People using a CPAP, people not using a CPAP. Now you may think, and this is not outdated research, and this is not something that was just happened to be found once by a stroke of imagination. Here's another study. I am shouting a lot. I just am. It's my passion. This is 2024. Just came out. And guess what they found? They got even more people, about 14,000 people. And they found that the use of a CPAP did not significantly reduce the risk of cardiovascular events or all-cause mortality or stroke or hospitalization or a... This should give you a lot of pause, because if this has been found twice in two large studies, we have to ask ourselves, why? Why are we told this? Now you need to look at this at face value, because a lot of times your doctors, or maybe other doctors even watching this, or respiratory therapists in the comment section, people will bring in their own bias of we're told all the time, like it is a religious doctrine. CPAP will be better for your heart. CPAP will be better for your heart. CPAP will be better for sure. That gets repeated again and again and again. Just because something is repeated nonstop does not make it true. Being able to have a hypothesis, investigate it accordingly, that's what allows us to find truth here. So whenever you find a new observation, you have to ask yourself, why? Why could this be a possible outcome whatsoever? Because we're told all the time it's going to be good for us. Now, the reason why is the CPAP or BiPAP or an ASV, which is like an automatic PAP, does not fix the underlying issue. Think about it. If you have a nail in your tire and then you just put some patch on it, guess what? It's still going to continue to drive through the tire more and more and cause a leaky tire. You need to fill it up again and again and again. And then guess what? You're going to bend the rim a whole lot and it's going to throw off everything else on the bike. And now I'm speaking from personal experience of the one time I blew a bike tire biking around in Miami. Now, biking around Miami is really dumb. What's really smart in comparison is understanding the underlying issue in what goes on with sleep apnea. So, really brief into the research. 1953, hyperventilation at night observed in a lab leads to sleep apnea. This is the same model of the disease. Inspiration, when you breathe in, this triggers the collapse of the airway. And that's because when you have some sort of narrowing in your airway, your adenoids, your tonsils, your palate, whatever, it's like breathing through a straw. Then, as a result, you have to breathe faster. And as you breathe faster, that will also weaken your muscles, like your tongue or your soft palate. As a result, once again, this is regardless if you have nasal issues, you have a narrow arch, whatever, it all comes down to this. You have a fast inhale that pulls the tongue back, blocks off the airway, and you're choking like that. This is the underlying issue. Just blowing it open with air does nothing to address it. You still continue to get this problem, which is why so many people use a CPAP and continue to do poorly. So bottom line, say it with me, say it proud, or just don't say it at all and just say it in your head. I don't really care. A fast inhale plus weak muscles, that leads to sleep apnea. And the idea of a CPAP not fixing the underlying issue is confirmed in the research. We won't get into this one, but you can look it up at your own time because we just love looking up scientific studies on our own time. Daytime loop gain. What the heck is that? Daytime loop gain is your body's response to breathing faster than it should. For example, you have a high loop gain if you walk up the stairs and you're out of breath. That's a high loop gain. A low loop gain is you sprint and you don't breathe faster than you would otherwise. And this is actually something maybe more familiar with a speaker or this microphone here. If I turn the gain way up, even if I speak the same volume, it will be louder. If I turn the gain down, then it'll be a lot softer. So when you have sleep apnea, you have a high gain. You're breathing too fast and you're breathing too fast in response to things. A CPAP does not change this. It does not reduce this. So when this breathing pattern continues, whether you're not using a CPAP or outside of that during the daytime, that's going to negatively impact your body. You're breathing fast, your sympathetic nervous system is going to go into overdrive. That increases your blood pressure, and high blood pressure is just the next step to a heart attack or a stroke. So this is why when we're looking at a CPAP, I'm like, yeah, it may get more air in you if you're able to tolerate it, but if it's not fixing the underlying issue, it's just going to be bad. And this is something you already know. If you've used one and gone off of it, the moment you go off it, those weak floppy muscles, they're going to go into the back of the airway because you're still breathing too fast, and then your sleep returns to awful. So altogether, this is how a CPAP, we're told it's going to protect us. Guess what? I'm here to tell you and take away your security blanket. 2 studies, 2017, 2024, 20,000 people altogether. It's not me telling you that. It's not one person. It's not one doctor on YouTube telling you that. It is the result and the experience of 20,000 people in some of the most prestigious articles in published scientific literature. Not me, it's them. So it's at this time you may start to get a little bit irritated and frustrated like I am. Maybe you're irritated at my detours and talking about all these different things on tangents, or about like this freaking going on. Because if we're not being told that, a basic fact that should be able to be easily conveyed, a fact that has existed for 7 years and has also been reconfirmed, if we're not told that, what else are they keeping from us? That's what you need to be asking yourself. Perhaps in a little bit of a conspiracy way. This is always my favorite conspiracy theory picture. I highly recommend Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But the thing is, you have to wonder, this device, what else are we not being told? So back in 2021, there was a recall about the Philips CPAP machine. And effectively what they found is that there was chemical concerns inside of these devices. And we go ahead and open up this article here. And so what you'll find in this article, and you can read it more in depth, I'll just go through a lot of the highlights. Effectively, they were finding that there was some stuff coming out of these machines Philips, a CPAP manufacturer, and there were a lot of issues with this, especially emitting dangerous chemicals that cause cancer. And it was in the plastic design of the CPAP. And just to give you an idea, let's imagine, and I know I tried not to draw, but we're going to do a little bit of drawing. I'm so sorry. Imagine that this is a part of the inner wall of a CPAP, like the tubing or any of the other innards of this device. It's actually in layers, layers of plastic or foam. When the air goes by, it's actually going to lead to some of this shedding off. It'll just peel off like this, and then you get this stuff that was supposed to be embedded into the walls of the inside of this machine. Guess what? It's going straight for your lungs. Congratulations. That's what was going on with these devices. But they had defective devices, but at the same time, guess what? They were running out of CPAPs. So just like any company that has their number one goal of their shareholders and not your health, don't believe me? Look at the profit margins for Philips. They still decided to push these machines out. And they didn't just push them out to anyone. It was predominantly to the Veterans Health Administration or the Veteran Health Affairs, the VA office. You're not in the US. That's where people who have served in our military, serving their country for freedom and rights and safety, that's where they go for healthcare. And what do we repay them with? We repaid 90,000 of them with defective machines that continue to string them out on a false hope of improving their sleep apnea or just straight up blasting chemicals inside of their lungs. That's what Philips decided to do for profits over these people's lives. And I say decided not as some incendiary statement or inflammatory thing. We're like, oh, cool, let's watch this video. No, this is literally what happened. So if we look in this article, again, where they were sending it to a lot of veterans and 90,000 of them were involved in this lawsuit, this actually, the first complaints started in 2010. 2010, which was 11 years before the lawsuit was launched. And their own internal reports were describing these black particles, dirt, and dust inside of the machines, or like an oily substance or contamination. And this is what I illustrated earlier, where the shavings are coming off of the plastic and then into the chamber where people are breathing that in. So this is something they noticed internally, and complaints continued to come in, but it was only until June 2021, many, many years later, they started with the recall. A decade. A full decade goes by of having concern about putting toxic carcinogenic materials into people who struggle to breathe anyway. If you look at the statements they released, they said it was no problem. We got to it as soon as we learned about it. But again, once investigated, the first complaints and everything else was 11 years ago. And this is literally breaking the law. The law is you have 30 days. If you find some big issue, you need to take action on it. You need to have some sort of recall or some sort of statement within 30 days, not within 25 years. It took 11 years to tell you something was wrong. And it just wasn't a few. It was 3,700 complaints over 11 years. And that's what eventually compounded to 378 reported deaths attributable to these devices. And when something like this happens, and this is a pretty classic thing you will see other signs of cover-ups. And I wish I could make this thing up, because when you look at a standard abstract of a paper, it never looks like this. It never has this just very clear statement. Usually it'll say, oh, we need some more research. These are some of the conclusions we found, etc. A little bit more middle of the road. But when we find this one where they looked at what's the risk of cancer in people using these devices, oh, it just so happens that sustained and adherent CPAP therapy using a Philips device was not associated with risk of cancer. Who says this? The person saying this, who I'm not even going to try to say this name, they are someone who gets money, payments from Philips. Do you see what's wrong here? This is like the fox saying the chicken coops are secure. Don't worry about it. You don't need security here. Just one person, another author on this paper, getting lecture payments from Philips. So with that in mind, your boss is never going to pay you to figure out what are the things going wrong in our company that we want to share with the world. they're going to do a piece like this. They're going to do a piece like this, just publish it anywhere. Nothing against Europe, but like the European Respiratory Journal, that is not a high authority journal like the Journal of the American Medical Association that we already went through. This is not take much, but got some people, paid them some money. Oh, here's a result. Interesting. And it's interesting that they would do this because guess what this was likely intended for? To be used as part of expert testimony in, drumroll please, a $1.1 billion lawsuit. So in these kind of lawsuits, they will pull people into a courtroom and be like, hey, we need some expert testimony from some people who did some research. Fancy, this is what we decided to use. Great law. But yet, if we check out what actually resulted from this lawsuit, and we'll find that we're now living in a twilight world where someone, a company, has to pay $1.1 billion, but they admit it's not their fault. That makes no sense at all. It's just legalese garbage of where, oh, it's not our fault, but also the court is ordering us to pay $1.1 billion out to people. So this is just some corporate cover-up to try to keep their profits over you. So this is like the second cover-up that we've unveiled and talked about here. But once again, you need to keep asking yourself, what else is going on? Because this is the tip of the iceberg that took 11 years to come to the surface. What is even deeper than that? And that's what I want to go into next. And this brings us to one of the biggest hidden dangers of not only a CPAP, but also mouth guards and any other plastic that you are chronically exposed to for hours every single night. And if you use a CPAP or a mouth guard, you use it for like 6 or 12 months. That's basically a month of being closely exposed to something known as microplastics. This is something we alluded to earlier of where if you have layers of plastic or pieces of plastic over time, through wearing them down, whether it's air going by, you're chewing on something, or other friction that's involved, that will lead to tiny microscopic pieces of plastic coming off of it and then going into you. And quite literally, if we look at it, how it works in a body, you have all these small things are now getting stuck inside of these tissues in your body. Here's the thing. It's very, very difficult to get these out. And when they're in there, they cause a lot of damage. So once again, they come from all these different pieces of plastic in your environment. You can breathe them in like a CPAP. You can ingest it like you would with a mouth guard, and then it just gets into your body and causes systemic damage. That's what the research has shown. I'll give you just a diagram from this article of all the different health impacts, whether it is making your immune system not work very well or work against you and lead to cancer, or it's going to hurt your liver or your nerves or your reproductive organs or your gut, or I think you get the idea. Microplastics are something that hurt your cells at such a small level, it has a widespread consequence throughout your body. And I think this is one of the biggest drivers of why when someone's using a CPAP long term, they're not feeling good because they're going to have this chronic insult to each and every single one of their cells in their body and causing damage that just builds and builds and leads to more and more inflammation. Now, it sounds great in theory, but what does the research say about microplastics in CPAP users? And that's exactly what this research study looked at. And what they looked at were circulating microparticles or microplastic MP in people with sleep apnea versus those without it. Now, they took it one step further. I wish I was in the meeting for this. They decided, hey, what if we take the blood from these people and put it into these mice? Kind of sounds like it's a bad X-Men movie or something. But that's what they did. The two major findings. Number one, people with obstructive sleep apnea and using CPAPs have higher levels of microplastic in their blood when compared to people who don't have sleep apnea and have not been using a CPAP. Thing number two, when you take that blood, you put it into mice, it will lead to damage inside of the blood vessels of these mice. It hurts something known as nitric oxide, and that's a big problem because when you have more nitric oxide, your blood vessels work better, they're flowing more freely, the blood just easily moves. When you have less nitric oxide, they contract, they get smaller, and it's harder to get blood flowing appropriately. And then there's a bunch of other molecules, cyclooxygenase, thromboxane, all these different things. Those are going haywire because of this microplastic. And that will then lead to higher blood pressure. High blood pressure is the gateway to heart attacks, to strokes, and those cardiovascular events that we were told a CPAP would stop. But as in 20,000 people have shown us, it doesn't really pan out that way. And what that looks like is when we have a nice, normal, healthy blood vessel, it's a lot more open. But when you are reacting to microplastics, it is going to lead to this contraction and then all those downstream issues with your blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, and all those different aspects. That is not what we want. And that's why, really, this is why I believe there's not consistent evidence for CPAP and longevity like we talked about earlier. That's why it's important to be able to have a way of where you're actually addressing the underlying issue and getting your body to a place where you're not dependent on a CPAP machine. Now, in no way am I saying anyone watching this video should stop using their CPAP. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you're able to make improvements in your breathing, your sleep metrics, and you're working with your professional healthcare provider, that is a better conversation you're able to have. Because whether you're watching and you've gone on a CPAP and maybe you lost weight and you were able to get off of it, or maybe you've been doing some breathing exercises or other healthy lifestyle changes, those people get off CPAPs. There's not a whole lot of them, but it does happen. Now, I want to be able to outline exactly how you can do that. And that's why I put together our CPAP Freedom Guide, where it's going to show you what that step process looks like to be able to give you and your healthcare provider a game plan, if you will. Now, as a special deal, it's only free and available to you if today is ending in Y. So if it's not, I'm sorry it's not available, but if it is that condition, I hope you get the joke. There should be a button up here you can press and download that, or I will put it in the comment section below. But once again, this is not me telling you to get off of CPAP, because that's a recommendation you will need from the person who gave you the CPAP and prescribed it to you. This is allowing you to know what that journey can look like in getting off of a CPAP. And I'll talk about this relaxed pause measurement in just a moment because it is super important. But once again, you can either click the button above my head or click the link in the description and you will find that there. Now for the relaxed pause measurement, this is something that is super important because that is what allows you to actually gauge your progress in what you're doing. So the reason I'm highlighting this is because that becomes one of the big mile markers and milestones that you will find in the CPAP free guide. So I want to go through and do the relaxed pause with you now. So I have our handy dandy timer and we're going to measure something known as your relaxed pause. All it is you inhale, exhale, and then you pause your breathing. That's all it is. It's called a relaxed pause because you shouldn't like really push it. You start to breathe again after you feel the first urge to breathe. And a good sign you've done it right is you inhale, exhale, and then you pause your breathing, and then you can resume a normal breathing pattern. You don't need to have this big compensatory inhale or anything like that. You can just relax into a normal breathing cycle. So again, we're going to do that. It's going to be inhale, exhale, pause, and at the first urge to breathe, inhale again. And that first urge will feel like this warmth, this discomfort in your chest or your throat. It shouldn't be this tightness or something like that. Just a small, uncomfortable sensation. That's what you're going for. So we're going to do this. Again, inhale, exhale, pause, breathe normally. So in 3, 2, 1, inhale. And then exhale. And then pause. And I'm going to let the timer go here. Many people, when they first do this, they are less than 15 seconds. When I first did this, I was 7 to 9 seconds. And again, you resume breathing at the first urge to breathe. And maybe you've already done that, maybe you haven't. I'll let this keep going. I'll let it go to 30 seconds. Most people will be done by now. Most of our clients start around 10 or 15. Some people go beyond that. So record that, because that's important. If you need to do this again, just rewind. That's why we have a video here. And then as you're going about your journey, you know what your relaxed pause is, and then you can use that as a metric as part of the CPAP Freedom Guide that I have made for you there. Again, click the button above my head or the link in the description, and you can go ahead and access that. Now for the next video. I'm not really sure what that will be, I'll be honest. But there may be a playlist above my head. I'm sure it's awesome. But either way, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any amazing content and more free guides for your sleeping pleasure and health journey. That's it for me today. I'm Dr. Dylan Peckus, and talk to you soon.